let's get started. I am Michelle Smith with Fourlane, and I am here to talk to you about reconciliation tricks. I'm going to start by covering the basics. Then we're going to talk about some efficiency solutions. I'm going to give you my easy process, just some suggestions on there. I'm going to identify some common errors and how to investigate those discrepancies, show you some ways to speed it up, and give you some shortcuts. So let's talk the basic reconciliation. We've got to understand that first. So if you are in QuickBooks, of course, you will go to your banking menu, the tab at the very top, and select Reconcile. Okay. From there, you will see this screen here pop up. And there you are going to use this drop-down arrow, to select which account you want to reconcile. Quick note here, it is a great idea and you have the ability to reconcile nearly all balance sheet accounts, and it's something we strongly recommend. Now, you can't do those with subledgers like inventory, accounts receivable, accounts payable, for example, but you can do other liability accounts, other asset accounts, fixed assets, all of those things. So don't just think in terms of bank and credit card accounts, right? Use this tool, it's very effective. Of course, you're going to put in your statement ending date. The next really important piece here is to review this beginning balance. Okay, QuickBooks will even give you a little helpful hint in case it doesn't match. You're going to want to look at that. You're going to enter in the ending balance from your statement. So everything here is comparing against what your source document says, which in context of a checking account is going to be your checking account statement. So that's what you're comparing against. I don't know if I said that. So you're going to use your checking account, the statement date, beginning balance should match what your statement says, and you'll be putting in that ending balance here. If you have any service charges, you can enter it in here easily. Same thing with interest. Fill out all that in and hit continue. Okay. Your next step is to look at each transaction on your bank statement and find its corresponding transaction here. The whole goal is to make sure that what is the source of truth, which is your bank statement, is equally reflected in QuickBooks, making sure nothing has been missed, nothing has been duplicated, that everything reconciles, okay? So that's what we're doing here. So you're going to compare each transaction from your bank statement against what's in QuickBooks. When you find it, you will put a check mark right next to it like this. Just click on the space and it will put the check mark here. You'll continue doing all of this, and if you have a good reconciliation, you're going to get a difference down here of 0. That is your goal. You can hit reconcile now at that point. Just a little tip, if your difference is less than $1, you need to consider whether it is worth going back and double checking everything. I have known some people who will spend hours looking for 10 cents. While I appreciate the thoroughness, you also have to be cost effective and really think about it. Now, I am not suggesting hitting this button if it's more than that, right? If you've got anything significant here, then you've got to decide what's significant, but truly, I don't like to go over $1 if I'm being honest. Then you do not want to hit reconcile now. QuickBooks will do a forced reconciliation, which means it will allow you to reconcile even if there is a difference showing here. If you do that, what will happen is it will post an adjusting journal entry automatically into a reconciliation discrepancy account, which you would see on your profit and loss statement. It is not good to have that. If you are ever wanting to double check your bookkeeper and make sure they're not forcing reconciliations, look there. Okay. Now, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty. How are we going to make these reconciliations efficient? So if everything is done properly and you get through it, you have a short reconciliation, great. That's not always the case. So we need to look for ways of how to speed this up and make it as easy as we possibly can. And here are some suggestions for you. First, a most important thing to me is to bypass manual entry. What does that mean? That means that you are not having to key in every single transaction, especially credit card transactions. Okay, now deposits, those are going to need to be keyed in, right? Because if you're doing it correctly, you're doing that through invoices. Bills, if you're using an accrual method, you're probably putting in and paying those bills. But what if you're doing credit cards? You may have hundreds and hundreds of transactions, okay? Particularly in those instances, use the bank feed. The bank feed is a great feature and pretty easy to set up. To get to that point, what you will do is you will go to bank and then bank feeds. You will see several options that will take you right through the process of connecting to your bank. Okay, once you do that, then it will pull over transactions from the bank into QuickBooks to review. It doesn't go right into the register, it'll come here to review. And you will see this here for transaction list. That is going to be the easiest way to get data into QuickBooks quickly and therefore go into your reconciliations quicker, okay? Because you're going to be less likely to have errors because it's pulling directly from the source document itself, right, the bank, and less likely to have anything missed. So in any circumstances that you can, use the bank feeds. Even if you are doing most things manually, you could still use the bank feeds. You just have to be careful on how to do them, because if it sees the transactions in QuickBooks, it will match to it. That's what you want to see if it's already there. And then you just connect anything that is missing from it. But that is something that we can help you with and train you in. Learning the bank feed is very important and can save you a ton of time, but I'm very fond of saying this to people because it's absolutely true. The bank feed is also the quickest way to mess up your books if you don't do it correctly. But I have to put it here because it is a huge time saver, makes everything efficient. So use the bank feed whenever possible. Secondarily, if you cannot, you may be able to import in the transactions from the bank. Okay. The next thing I would recommend, there is a feature in QuickBooks Desktop, if you don't already know about it, called rules. You want to set up criteria so that when the transaction comes in from the bank statement or through an import, it will automatically categorize things correctly for you. And you will see this button right here for rules. Very easy to set up, self-explanatory, set up rules. Huge time saver and helps you with consistency. Next, don't forget to sync. There is a sync button over here. Don't just come over here and assume that these 3 transactions are all that is there. Make sure you hit the sync button. You'll see it that last update in this particular set over a year ago. So obviously somebody needed a sync. So don't forget the sync button. Next, you can customize the bank feed. So after you have pulled in the data and you go to your transaction list, you will get something that looks similar to this. You could customize this. So you can see these drop downs. You even have an option to show the bank memo. So don't forget about that. That can help speed things up. You can batch enter your data here. Copy paste. Let's say it's the same account. You can copy paste it down. You can sort by the name. So let's say you have 100 transactions in here and all the payees are filled in. Sort by payee, and then you can just put in the account once, copy paste it down, then go to the next one. Good time saver. I've put on here for use suspense. What does that mean? Suspense is an account that I use. So when I am working on a client's file, I will create an account, an other expense account called suspense. And what I use that for is if a transaction is coming through the bank feed and I do not know what it is for, I'm going to categorize it to suspense. Why do I do this? 2 reasons. Number 1, it will get it out of the bank feed. Actually, 3 reasons. So number 1, it will get it out of the bank feed, so we can continue working the file. We can, number 2, continue with reconciliations, right? And then number 3, at the end of the month, we have one account that we can easily go over with the client and reclassify those transactions. If you do it this way, it will not mess up any kind of reconciliation you've done. Everything's in one place, easy to sort, easy to reclass, and move forward. So that's the reason that I use suspense. And this last one here, now this has to do with rules. And the reason I'm recommending this is just as a FYI, if a transaction comes through the bank feed, and that's what we're talking about in this instance, and let's say it is a check, QuickBooks will not be able to know who that vendor is unless you had previously entered it yourself. So it will sometimes pick up the last vendor you put in. So let's say the last check you put in was for John Smith Landscaping. But now you got another check coming in, but this one is for Jane Jones for advertising. Don't think that QuickBooks is able to know that from the bank. The bank doesn't have that information. It just says check. But sometimes it's trying to do its AI thing and remember, make things easier. And in fact, it's making it harder in this instance. And it is changing the name and putting a payee down as the landscaper. And if you're like me and you look at this and you see this here, you might just think, oh, it's already in. It's not. So as a fail-safe, I always will set a rule for unknown for checks. Also, what I will do, honestly, is put that check automatically into suspense. So I'm automatically posting all checks in suspense because it's at the end of the month, because I'm doing this efficiently, that I want to go into the bank and look at every vendor on those checks. So I'm only doing it once a month. And again, we can still reconcile. The last reason that this all works well is because if you keep this feed clear and you look at your bank account, you're going to know what your dollars are because you've already put everything in here. So even if you don't have an official reconciliation, you still have a good idea where you're at. All right, I'll keep moving here. Organize. The other thing you want to do is have everything ready to go. You don't want to be having to look for everything when you are getting ready to do those reconciliations. So have your statements ready. If you have multiple months, you want to start with your oldest statement always. Okay? You need to compare that beginning balance right here. This needs to match your statement's opening balance. If it does not, you will never be able to get this reconciled correctly. You need to be able to have this be correct first, right? You have to start off with the right number. If you don't, that requires some troubleshooting, and that goes well beyond the scope of this meeting. I would say if you're in that position, reach out and we can help. Don't forget the ending balance, all right? So you want to make sure everything's verified. Okay, so what's the process that I follow? I do several things. Actually, the very first thing that I do is clear out anything that is old. So in this case, you can see we've got a bunch of old transactions from 2007 and 8, one from 2024. I want to clear all, oh, sorry, this is one I entered. So we have all of these uncleared checks many, many years ago. I'm not going to just bypass those and start clearing here. Get these out of the way. We want to get rid of all the noise. So clear it out first. How do you do that? Let's say you see right here that we have a total amount of checks that were highlighted for $11,052.71. So to counteract that, I have created a journal entry for that same amount. And now where you offset it to, that's something you need to talk to either us about or to your CPA, because that's going to depend on different factors. Okay, but the idea here is it needs to be the same amount to clear this off. So now all of these are checked. This is checked. Our difference is 0. Now, mind you, I have put in the same This is the beginning balance. I have put in the same ending balance to do this. So this is not a full reconciliation that you normally would think of. This is what I would consider a partial one to get us to the right place. So I'm clearing this out against the same ending balance. The purpose is to clear these out to 0. Oops, there we go. Another thing to do, decide if you're going to do your deposits first or your checks and payments first. Figure out which one you want to do and focus on that first, right? You want to get all of this equal before you move on to the next. You want to tackle in pieces. Instead of, and if you think of, if sometimes when you look at a bank statement, it's not segmented that way. Sometimes it'll be chronological. It's much easier if you just focus on all deposits first or all checks first, rather than the date. I recommend using the highlight marked. For me, it just makes it easier to see. And this is another real important one too. You want to hide transactions after the statement date. The easiest way to manage reconciliations is to do it with the least amount of noise possible. So you are only focused on the data at hand. So get rid of everything you don't need. So we get rid of the old stuff, and this will help you get rid of all the stuff that happens after the statement date. Okay. The next thing to take in mind is the deposits. You want to make sure your deposits are correct and they're matching. And that kind of starts in good processes before you get here. So you want to make sure that you are using the undeposited funds account properly. All right. If you're using this properly, and if you are batching payments, let's say you have 10 payments that have come in during the course of the day, you should have one deposit because that's actually what you have taken to the bank. I am sure you're not doing one deposit at a time or one payment getting deposited at a time. So the idea is to make sure what is showing in your QuickBooks file as a deposit is actually what has happened. Okay, so if you do this properly, your reconciliation is going to be much faster and more efficient because it's going to match. Otherwise, you'll have a series of payments that you're trying to add up to figure what makes up that deposit. If you're missing checks, take a look at the reports banking missing checks to help you identify them. Don't forget interest and fees. These can be easily forgotten, especially on credit cards. And that sort feature is your friend. Use it judiciously. Okay, so you've gone through all the steps and it just is not working. What do? First thing to do, trust me on this, go back and verify you have the correct beginning and ending balances. I know you did this before, do it again. I cannot tell you how many times I have tried fixing reconciliation and looking only to realize I put in the wrong ending balance. I put in an average balance or something from the statement. If you are off, that's the first thing you should check. The next thing you want to do is segment into chunks. What is off? We want to try to get this down to the lowest possible denominator. For example, look at those numbers. Checks and payments. Does this match your bank statement? If it does, is it the deposits that are off? Let's try to get it down to what piece is off so you can focus on just that piece. More things to ask. How much is it off? Okay, so if the difference is more than what's on your bank statement, then you have more checked than you should. What can cause that? One of the most frequent errors that would cause that is that you have a duplicate in that account. Right? Something has come over twice. A lot of things can cause it. Transfers are the biggest culprit, but you've got something duplicated. The easiest way to find that, use the sort feature for amount. So sort on the amount, and like here you could see, that's pretty easy to see. And in this case, let's say you're off by $24, you have just found the culprit. Clear that off, void it out, and you'll be good to go. If you are off, let's say by, in this case, let's say you were off by $218. You sorted it, now you can find, Here's something for $218. Double check. See, that was from a different period. So that shouldn't be on that reconciliation. If you have a credit card especially, they tend to go like middle of the month for whatever reason. A lot of times, like Amex, let's say the statement is through the 12th. So you've got everything cleared off except transactions that have come in through the 12th, but you're off, right? You're over. Look at the last several transactions and compare it against your bank statement. Often what you will find is some of those last ones did not hit the statement. So look at that. If you do this first, you will eliminate having to start all over from the beginning. Okay. So you can see right here, for example, the difference is 102.65, and here's 102.65. So we are finding it. So what if it's the other way? What if it's less? Then you know you are missing something. So kind of the same concept, other way around. How much is missing? Look at that bank statement. Is there an amount for that, like a check maybe, for that exact amount? That'll help you figure out where you're at. Look at the clear date, right? Look at those dates. So maybe like this one, for example, is January 1st. If you'd had that checked, like in here, that caused the difference. Kind of like we just talked about in the other one, sometimes, especially payroll will do this a lot. Maybe you've got a transaction that hit the bank, but it actually posted in QuickBooks for the next day. So maybe it was January 1st, and so it hit the bank on the 31st for payroll. So if you've got that button checked here, which is, again, still good to do, it's not going to show. So if you're in that position, uncheck it just to see if you've got something that shows up for the next day. Okay, here's another really cool feature that works. If the amount that you are off, if you add those digits, comes out to 9, that can be an indication that you've either transposed it or your decimal point is in the wrong place. Try it. It really works. For example, if you're off by $18, if you add those digits, 1 plus 8, that comes to 9. If that is the case, then you can look and find a transposed digit. So here would be an example. So maybe you entered 435, or it should be 435, but you entered 453. The difference is 18. It would have been a 9. That's an indicator. The same thing happens, interesting enough, if you have misplaced a decimal point. Give that a go. All right. Now, sometimes we just have such long statements. I've had clients that have had thousands of thousands of transactions on one statement. That can be very difficult to get through, especially if everything is checked that should be checked, that you can tell, and you're off. And all of those other little checks don't come up with anything. What do you do? Okay. Well, the first thing would be make sure you're doing good processes. The way I do it, number one, sort, customize the screen, make sure everything shows what you're looking for, and use it to filter your dates, right? So you're only looking for the dates that you need. What I like to do, this is just my personal preference, is I do deposits first. So I will do all of my deposits, make sure all of those work out. They just tend to be less than all of the expenses. So I'm trying to whittle it down. I get all the deposits clear, then I move on to the expense side. I will sort by check number. And usually those are segmented on the bank statement. So I'm looking for all those check numbers, putting them in order, checking those off. That I've got all my checks checked off and they match what is on the statement. Then I go to the next step, which is by date. And then I'm going through like the electronic ones. Now, if you just have too many and you can't go through it, you can use, oh, I skipped one. If you are missing a specific amount, don't forget to try the F2 and just search on that amount. Sometimes you will find that you have posted in the wrong account. So what else could you do when you just have way too many transactions? Use Excel. Excel can be your friend. So download those bank transactions if you have access there into an Excel tab. Download the bank transactions, like you export it out, right? So you have one tab for your QuickBooks data, you have one tab for your the bank data. And then use Excel, like VLOOKUP, for example, or AbleBits has a compare to sheets. Great tool, love it, very inexpensive. Or use Excel to compare the two sets of data and identify the variances. Now you know, okay, these checks didn't clear. Now you can just go check all and just undo those checks. And ta-da, you've hit 0. That can be your friend if you've got a lot of data. It's all about what is quicker, right? If you've got so much data, it's quicker to put in Excel, use Excel, right? One more note, sometimes if you're missing a lot of pieces, let's say you just have a credit card and something happened with the feed, for example, and you're missing chunks or things just didn't go through or things didn't get set up right. Sometimes it is just easier to get rid of all of that from your QuickBooks and import it in. So just something to think about. Again, as you're doing this, just think about what you're trying to do and what could be the fastest way to do it. There's also some quick shortcuts to use. There's a Control R for Open Reconcile, Control E for Edit, Control F for Find, Control N New, Control R Open Register. And if you are in there, if you hit Control G, it'll take you to the opposite account, right? The offset account, which is very cool. Really great when you're trying to troubleshoot transfers. And that is it for today. We are right at time. I hope everybody has gotten a nugget or two from this. Hope it's provided you with some value. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out. If you put it in chat, we'll get back with you. Here is my email. Feel free to reach out. Happy to help. Thank you so much to all of you for spending your time with me today.